It's AFA Today on AFR Talk, and Cavill McCulloch is my name. I'm always glad to have you with us. Our phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. The president saying yesterday that changing the rules on the filibuster so that you could do it with just 51 votes as opposed to 60 or 67 votes, depending on the type of filibuster being used, was a good thing. He said it was necessary. He said the government's so bad that now you have people that want to gum it up, and they're the ones that complain about big government, but they do everything, in his words, to make sure that government doesn't work. Mr. President, that was kind of the idea that the Founding Fathers had. They didn't want government to do things easily, because when governments do things easily, they run over the people of the nation. That's what they do, because they're not spending their own money, because they're spending the taxpayers' money. They tend to not pay attention to things like, efficiency and all kinds of other things that sometimes those of us in the private sector who have to live real lives and balance real checkbooks and live on real budgets every week, we have to live our lives a little bit differently than you big-time elitists up there in Washington, D.C., who lives all off of the taxpayers' dime. That's because you don't know really how to work for a living, actually, come to think of it. You just take more of what I earn. Wow. That's not so good. But now, even one of the breaks that we could apply to the process to say, hold on a second. You still work for us. We're still checking you out here. Now we've just done away with that. How do you feel about this? One party just saying, so what about common sense and having to work together and everything? We're just changing the rules. We don't like them, so we're going to take our ball and go home. That's kind of how they're acting, kind of like 6-year-old brats on the playground. But the difference is now they're doing it with executive and judicial nominees. They're going to pack our courts with hideous, awful judges that really won't care about what the Constitution has to say at all. Anybody think that's important? I don't know. In an appeals case, when you've got something that's debating the issue of, national sovereignty, maybe immigration, or something that has to do with the best interest of the United States and the American people versus like people that aren't documented and from other places. Because now in California, you can have non-documented people serving on juries. Yeah, non-citizens get to sit in judgment of citizens. I don't understand that at all. But having judges that are qualified, that are on the benches for the right reason, that's not that big of a deal, right? Come on, we can live with this. It's just politics. Why are you Christians even all worried? Aren't you just supposed to be praying and sitting in the closet reading your Bible all day? Isn't that what Christians are supposed to do? You're always talking about this worldly stuff, like, public policy, and you bunch of Bible thumpers. Does this matter at all, that they just changed the rules and said, it doesn't matter? The president thought it did at one point in time. He said this in 2005, and he was rather demanding about it.
And keep quiet. The American people want less partisanship in this town, but everyone in this chamber knows that if the majority chooses to end the filibuster, if they choose to change the rules and put an end to democratic debate, then the fighting and the bitterness and the gridlock will only get worse.
Huh. That's interesting. Because he was saying yesterday that by getting rid of this, we're going to improve everything. Your reactions to this. Let's talk to those of you that have opinions about it. We start with Lee calling from Texas. Lee, welcome. I'm Cavill McCulloch. So glad you're with us. Hi.
Hello, Kevin. I just want to say, listening to you, I'm so worked up I can hardly almost not speak. First off, not to get any praise, but I am an Air Force veteran. I am a minister of the gospel of Christ to the Baptist denomination. I'm also a truck driver. And listening to you I always listen to you. I listen to AFA all across the country since I'm a truck driver. But I can hear in your voice, I think, over the last few days especially, what I'm feeling. I do not want any kind of bloodshed in this country. I want peace for everybody. That's my first and foremost, the peace of Christ. But when do we stand up and say enough is enough? I know I always hear from all the people on AFA, Tim Wildman and Crane Durham and you and Dan Tilly and everybody. We don't want anything bad to happen, and I'm not calling for a revolution or anything like that. But at the same time, they are stacking the deck in Washington against us, where we're not going to be able to use the normal processes, where we're getting our hands tied behind our backs, to where it's, I don't know, I don't want to say fight or fall. I don't want it to go to that either. But, when do we stand up and say, this is our nation? Our forefathers set this up in a way for us to prosper and to, I know we're not, quote unquote, a Christian-only nation. We have freedom of religion here, and I believe that's the way it should be. But to follow the principles that were given to us through the Bible and stand up for this and say, hey, we're not taking this anymore. I am so mad about this, I can't see straight. But anyway,
yeah, Lee, no, you know what? I totally hear it, and in your voice, and I know it in your heart. Let me just pose let me sprinkle some salt on stuff that you just said there. When you really get down to the bottom line on this, what we're talking about is a political party, and I'm not saying either, and I don't wear a jersey for either team, right? So, but in this case, there is one political party that has gone above and beyond in its breaking of the rules. They are now doing something that I just played you the evidence of that they all argued against less than 10 years ago. President Obama, Harry Reid, Joe Biden are flaming hypocrites, because they make this one argument about how all of democracy will fall in on itself if we do away with these checks and balances that keep things in place. And what do? They just get rid of it as fast as they can, the moment they have the chance. By the way, it's in the middle of an absolute disaster. Maybe they were hoping to take some light off of the Obamacare, fallout for a little while, but that's not, and that's the only thing that they got accomplished in his first term. What you're looking at is absolute chaos. Interesting that that's the word I use, because there's an advantage for politicos in chaos. But what you're talking about is a political party that has lost its moral soul. There is no morality in the heart of a registered Democrat, not one that believes in the party and believes in its doctrinal statement. And if you're a Democrat by birth, meaning, well, my mama voted Democrat and my papa voted Democrat, so I'm going to vote Democrat until I die, and I'm going to tell my children to vote Democrat till they die, well, that's kind of stupid. And so there's a lot of people that walk through life being unthinking like that, but it's not necessarily morally wrong. It's just uninformed. And I'm not saying stupid in a derogatory way. I'm meaning it's the literal mathematical definition of stupid. If you vote for something not knowing anything about it, it's an unwise or uninformed choice. There's no information being processed by the brain that is causing that vote to be cast for a rational or logical reason. Maybe emotional, and the vampy void that allows us to get all worked up in, but it's not for anything that's sound. There's no substance there. So, and if that's you, that's one thing. But if you actually are a registered Democrat and you're arguing that the party that you belong to, and again, I don't wear a Republican or Democratic jersey. I believe that both parties have their problems and are full of them. But if you are a card-carrying, active, proactive mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, you have no moral soul in you anymore. Because the party that you're advocating for and activating for and doing all of this stuff for said yesterday they don't care about laws or rules. They said, we're just going to make up the laws we go along, no matter what the legislative process is. When it comes to Obamacare, it doesn't matter. And when it comes to the checks and balances that are encoded within our Constitution that some of us actually believe should be the law of the land and what we hold ourselves accountable to. They're saying, none of that. We don't have to follow that either. And they're only doing it because they're at a vote disadvantage. They can't push through the agenda that they want to get because we're not liberal enough on our nation's judges, benches, and so forth. They've got to do everything they can to make us the most progressive, the most liberal, the most untied to the Constitution that's possible. And you know what's really genius about how they do it? They look you in the eye, they look in the camera, and they say, and this is what the forefathers wanted. That's what President Obama said yesterday. The forefathers would never be in favor of allowing the filibuster to stand under these circumstances. I think if they didn't feel that way, they probably would have said that, don't you? They probably would have said, well, if it gets really, out of whack and the one side just can't get everything through that they want to get through, well, then you should change the rules. That's not what they said. They said, we think it's best that you have this number of votes to change the rule of the filibuster for judicial and executive nominees. So they're feeding you poison and they're telling you it's candy. And if you don't like it, somehow that makes you a racist or a hate monger of some sort. Yes, Mr. Jollywell administration. Thank you for the poison. It's the sweetest poison I've ever had in my entire life. Thank you so much. Thank you. May I have some more, please? But there's no morality left in the Democratic Party. There's no restraint left in the Democratic Party. There's no virtue. There is vice. There is getting my way at the expense of all others. And you know what? You know how I know that there's some degree of truth to this? They walk around talking about how they're the party of the people. In the Virginia and the New Jersey governor's race, do you know who the largest number of voters were for the Republican nominee in both of those states? This is going to blow your mind. People with a high school education or less, a formal education. Now, how are all these dummies running around without degrees, college degrees, graduate, and you know what group of people were the greatest supporter for the liberal candidates in those two races? People that had at least some work done on towards their master's degree. Meaning, we're seeing the separation of our populace. The elites are voting for one form of government that's establishing what they want for themselves, and all the dumb people that they think they should be thinking on behalf of, they're all voting against them. So how's the argument going to go? Well, eventually the elites with the power base, they're going to say, well, all you dumb people that don't know what you're doing, you need us here. You don't really know what's good for you, and you shouldn't be given the same number of rights that everybody else is. In fact, we should make a bunch of these decisions for you so that then you don't have to do all that worrisome thinking on your own. Because we know how hard it is for you to decide simple things like, what you should believe or what surgeries you should get or, what kind of food you should eat or what kind of car you should drive. How's all that working for us? You know where a lot of that can and should be getting stopped? Is through procedural filibusters in the Senate. 888-589-8840. I don't mean to make your blood boil, but I have a feeling there's not really an option on this one today. Let's go back to Texas and talk to Lewis. Lewis, hi, Cavill McCullough. So glad you're with us.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. You at least stole a little bit of my thunder, but I wanted to make a point that, what they did was wrong, but it seems to me that what difference does it make with the current Republican establishment we have, because it doesn't matter what the rules are. The Democrats have not been following them, and the Republicans have been sitting around with their hands in their pocket watching it happen. And when people who come up, like the Tea Party, who want to do something about it, and who want to get back to the roots of this country, they're stifled by the Republicans.
Right.
I think that the Republicans are a Judas sheep who are standing in the gap, pretending to fight for us, but they're not really fighting for us. They're fighting against us. And
I think some of them are. I think you're right. I don't think that Ted Cruz falls into that category.
No, I don't. I mean as a whole. I don't mean every individual.
But I certainly think that Mitch McConnell has done his share of contributing to that problem.
I agree. And I think, just like Lee kind of mentioned, we are the proverbial frog in the boiling pot. Things are coming down against us. There have been more violations against our constitutional rights under this administration than any other time.
Lewis, let me expound on that. There have been more violations against constitutional rights under this administration than the previous amount of our history combined.
And that's the danger. And I really believe, I sincerely believe, whether people think this is a conspiracy or not, I think what the American public is in physical danger, and I don't put it past this president to use some type of what was it? You don't let a good crisis go to waste. Some type of crisis where he's going to declare martial law, and that's going to be the end of it. And I don't know, honestly, as a Christian, Lee kind of brought the point up, I don't know what to do, because obviously God is in control. God puts people in power, and he takes them out of power. And when Israel wanted a king, he said, I'll give you a king. And they got their king, and he did exactly what God said was going to do. And they were oppressed, and they would cry out to God. Well, I think God has given us the president that we deserve as a country. But as a Christian, I honestly don't know whether I should, revolt like my forefathers did, or just, obey the government like Romans 13 says, and just, bear up under it. I honestly don't know what to do.
Well, Lewis, let me touch on that when we come back, because there's a point to be made about that I think is a legitimate one. Thank you for continuing the conversation. 888-589-8840. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk.